Today on Home Theater Fanatics, we're going to build and review the Harbottle Audio M18X subwoofer. What's up, Fanatics? Today I get to talk about one of my favorite things, subwoofers. Yeah, you know I love them. You've seen all the build videos that I've done over the years. Well, I've got my hands on a new one, and this is a DIY-ish kind of setup, but it's not as hardcore as the ones I've done before. It's a whole different kind of animal. You still get to DIY and be hands-on, but it's a little bit easier. You still get to make it whatever you want it to be as far as the aesthetics go, but this box is smaller, it's easier to deal with, and it's also a sealed platform. And I'm talking about the Harbottle Audio M18X. I was talking to Cody over at Harbottle Audio, and I was telling him about my problems with bass in my theater, right? I love bass, but all the boxes are always too big. I don't have enough space. It's hard to get a subwoofer under my screen. And he recommended that I give his M18X a shot. Now, this is a sealed box, runs his own 18-inch subwoofer, and it's small enough to fit under my screen so I can have it in the front of my theater. Now, I've done a lot of builds in the past. They've always been larger and they produce a lot of bass, but I can't put them where I want to put them at. So this is something totally different. So he packaged one up and sent it over, and today we're going to go through the whole process of building this thing out. So this comes in kit form. Now it's assembled, but it's not finished. So if you wanted to, you could just plug it right into an amplifier, go to town. So if you're going to use this as an architectural speaker, put it behind a screen, hide it somehow, then you might not need to do anything to it, and you could just treat it as a completely finished product. But for me, this is going to be out in the open. It's going to be seen, so I'm going to need to do something to make it more appealing to the eyes, because it comes as raw Baltic birch. Now, I love Baltic birch, and this does present some opportunities that I've not had in the past doing DIY kits. Now, in the past, I've always painted everything because it's always been MDF, and that's pretty much all you can do. But Baltic birch, you can treat it like a piece of wood. So it's not like a super nice veneer finish, but it's still pretty good, and you can stain it and do those kinds of things. So in this video, I'm going to disassemble the box. I'm going to pull the driver out. I'm going to finish it, and I'll stain it, and I'll show you how to do that soup to nuts. And this is my first time, so it's going to be fun to kind of learn this process with you as we go along. After it's all finished, reassemble. Then I'm going to put this in the theater. I'm going to integrate it with my system. I'm going to tune it, and then I'm going to measure it and see exactly what kind of damage this massive 18-inch subwoofer can do in my home theater. Now, to get started, let's go ahead and jump in and look and see what this thing looks like when it arrives and pulling it out of the box. The M18X is one of 3 different kits available from Harbottle. So there's the M18X, but also in the 18-inch form factor is a M18S. There's also the M24 if you want to step up to a much larger subwoofer. The packaging for the unit is really nice. So you've got an external cardboard box, but inside of that is a layer of thin plywood. That gives it a ton of protection. Once you get this unboxed, there are a lot of goodies inside of the packaging. So there's obviously the enclosure itself, and in the enclosure you'll find mounted the subwoofer. Included with the box and the sub are all the other pieces that you need for a complete subwoofer kit. So you've got all your wiring, your speak-on port for the back of the box, as well as a speak-on end for your speaker wire coming from the wall. You've got your feet, screws for the feet, a badge, you have your polyfill, and then I don't know how long this is going to keep going, but you also get a goodie bag with a t-shirt and a mug there as well. The enclosure comes unfinished. It's built of Baltic birch and is 18 millimeters thick, except for the front baffle, which is 36 millimeters thick. The driver is recessed and includes a trim ring that acts also as a seal. The seal box has a volume of 111 liters. The dimensions of the box are 28 inches high, 16 inches deep, by 20 inches wide, and this is the perfect size to fit under my screen. The M2C18 driver is included in this kit. However, it can be purchased separately if you want to build your own enclosure. The frequency response is 5 to 90 Hz with a recommended crossover point of 90 Hz, and power handling is 2,500 watts minimum to 3,500 watts RMS. After unboxing the subwoofer, the first step in getting ready to finish the enclosure is to remove the driver. Now, this seems pretty straightforward, but there are a couple of things that you need to consider. Well, first, you got to get the screws out. That part's easy. Use a screwdriver or electric drill, whatever you got, and those come right out. You'll want to retain those screws and use them again, as that they fit this driver specifically. So they're a really great match for mounting the driver into this plywood. Once the screws are out though, that's when things get a little tough, because the gasket, that plastic trim ring that's around the edge of the subwoofer, really creates a vacuum, and it's kind of tough to get this thing out. There's no real way to pull this out while the sub is sitting on its back with the driver facing up. So you're going to need to set this thing on the side and then tilt it forward so that gravity can help you get this to come out. Once you get the driver to finally let go and come out of the box, be very careful, because the cabling attaching the driver to the input on the back of the box is not long at all. It's just basically enough to make the connection. So there's not any ample extra that will allow you to pull the subwoofer all the way out and set it to the side and then deal with the connections. So when the driver pops out, stick one hand in under the edge and go ahead and release that speaker wire. Once you've got that done, the driver will be out and your box is almost ready to go. Make sure to pull out all the polyfill too, because you don't want that to get all nasty while you're putting the finish on. But at that point, you're ready to take this box and put it wherever you're going to actually put your finish on at. Now that we've got the driver pulled out of the box, it's time to work on finishing the enclosure, and we're going to do that here in my garage. We're going to do something though this time that I have not done before, which is stain wood. So I've done a lot of painting in the past, but this is the first time that I'm going to actually take a piece of real wood and stain it. And since this is my first time, I've kind of gone crazy, and I've got pretty much everything that I could think of to use on this enclosure. The first step in the process is to clean the box, and to do that, I use a 50-50 mix of water and denatured alcohol. I simply wipe this on with a rag and then let it dry. Now at the end of that process, you're going to have some wood grains that rise up. Well, for that, I have some 220 grit sandpaper that I use to knock all that down. After the box has been cleaned, I move on to a pre-stain conditioner. Now this is a gel product, and I use a foam brush to apply this. So just cover the box down, and then I'll use a rag to wipe off the excess. I do that on all sides and then give it time to dry. Once the wood is conditioned, then it's time to move on to staining, and this is the serious step. And this stuff was kind of tricky to deal with. So this is a pure liquid, so it's not a gel, it's not thick, it's just like water. And this is a dye, and specifically this is General Finishes water-based dye stain in the dark brown color. And I use this simply by pouring it onto the wood, and then I use a brush to smooth it out. Let it stand for just a little bit, start to dry, and then use a rag or paper towels to wipe off the excess. I did this on the entire box, let it dry, and then did it a second time. In between the first and second coats, I did use the 220 to go ahead and knock it down just a little bit, because as water hits this wood, it causes some of the grain to stand back up, and you want to keep that as smooth as possible. After the stain is done, then you're going to move on to the top coat. And I used water-based flat out top coat from General Finishes. And the application of this is really straightforward too. Used a foam brush to lay it down, and then I let this dry. After it dries, I come back with a, gosh, this is 350, I think, to lightly smooth it down. So I'm not trying to take any of the finish off. I'm just trying to make it as smooth as possible. And I ended up with 2 coats of this as well, with a final sand on that top coat as well, and it turned out wonderfully. So now that you know the tools that I'm going to use for this, let's go ahead and jump in and let you see it all in action. With the finish on, the next step is to install the feet. Now, these feet came included along with the screws, and they were super easy to install. I simply marked out 2 inches from each side, and then using the included screws, attached the feet. I didn't drill pilot holes, I just jammed them right in there. If you've made it this far, you're in the final stretch, right? So all that's left is to replace the polyfill, and I just jammed it in there. I thought about using a little bit of spray glue, but I didn't have any handy, so it just got jammed in there the way it came. I think if you want to make that a little sturdier, maybe a little spray adhesive, but I wouldn't use too much. You don't want to get it wadded too tightly in there. From there, you need to replace the subwoofer. And remember, just as you had, a tight space taking it out, replacing the sub, putting it back in is also pretty tight, and you'll connect the speaker leads to the exact same spots that you removed them from before. Once that's done, you'll want to gently set the subwoofer back into the cabinet. Make sure to line up the screws. If they misalign a bit, you can take 2 screwdrivers and put on each side in the screw holes and kind of drive it around, pushing left and right on those screwdrivers to slightly move the speaker in a circular motion. But once you get that in, then you can use the screws that you had before to snug this thing back down. One thing to be careful about is the gasket, the plastic edge that's attached to the subwoofer can get caught if you're not careful when you replace this. Make sure you shimmy that back in and get that gasket to go back in straight. Placement of the subwoofer is pretty easy. The box isn't super heavy, so it's easy enough to move around alone. And then it's simple to connect the speak-on connector to the back of the speaker once you get it where it needs to be. It is now time to get down to the nitty-gritty. So we've got everything built and got it installed. It's all plugged in. Now, we can see exactly what this thing does, and it's kind of amazing to watch the transformation. So I've got RAW pulled up, and I'm going to show you the raw measurements and then kind of where we get to with a little bit of tuning. And to get this tuning done, I actually enlisted aid from Cody himself from Harbottle. So this is all his magic. I can't claim any of this brilliance, but it's kind of interesting to see how we got from the beginning to the end. And I'll step it through kind of at a high level, but you can kind of see what's going on. So the first thing I did was measure the M18 near field, and that is this. So when you look at this curve, man, that's nothing spectacular at all, really, right? So, nice sealed descent from 41 Hertz on down to the nether regions. But remember, this is a near field recording measurement, and the room does stuff and tuning does stuff, and it gets kind of crazy. So now to do the tuning, we use 2 tools, and I'm going to pull these up for you. So the first is miniDSP. And what's kind of interesting, I'm actually sitting at my desk in my office right now, and I'm connected to the miniDSP that's in the theater. So if you guys haven't figured out how to do remote control over your miniDSP from pretty much anywhere, especially in your house, it gets a little bit harder outside of your home. You can totally do that, and I'm going to drop a video so you can see how that's done. But you can do that from pretty much anywhere. So we used miniDSP, and then we also used some settings in the processor itself. And this is the remote management tool for the Acurus Act 4. And this is another great one because you can manage this stuff from anywhere. Like I said, I'm sitting in my office, but I can still see all the settings for all my speakers wherever I'm at, and it's kind of cool. So let's get back to these measurements, and I'll show you kind of what we're dealing with here. So this was the raw measurement. We're going to go ahead and turn that off. And then at the main listening position, and this is where we're going to tune at. And remember, we're just doing this with one subwoofer. In a real world scenario, meaning kind of a, full system, I'm going to have multiple subs because everybody knows that you can get a smoother response with multiples. But for this exercise, we're just looking at the one, as that I'm reviewing just one of these. And this is what the mains look like at the main listening position, crossed over at about 100 hertz. So, obviously that neuters all the bass out of these guys. And, they're, plus or minus 3 or 4 decibels, kind of up in that mid bass range, high bass range, low treble range, normal kind of stuff. Room's doing all kind of weird things. And if we take a look back over at the Acurus, we can see that, so for that left and right, little level down, 100 hertz crossover, and then check the right as well, same. No delay set for these guys at all. So that's what's working there. Now, we also have this subwoofer is Subwoofer 2 on the setup, and this, all that's happening out of the processor is the maximum crossover for this is 200. So, and that's set there. Now, getting back over to these measurements, that's the mains, not tuned, so no EQ, no delay. And then if we add in the sub at the main listening position, so this is crossed over but not tuned at all. And this is this obviously isn't when the main's playing. And this 60 hertz null, that is all room induced, right? So that there's going to be nothing I can do about that one without some additional subwoofer action. All right, now with the magic of some DSP, so let's come over here. So we've got 0.9 milliseconds of delay. And then for crossover in here, this is the curve that we've applied to the subwoofer. And then for parametric equalizer, we gave a bit of boost here to smooth things out and to fix some of the irregularities. We used gain, here are the different settings specifically. So you can see that guy at 35, it's a peak filter. Then we did a low shelf at 23 with some gain, and then another low shelf at 60 with some gain. So those are the configuration changes that we made from an EQ point of view. And what's interesting is you take these two with that EQ, all the settings, one subwoofer, and you end up with that. And if you look at it, these are 5 decibel gaps. So you're looking at, for the sub, remember, this is a room null. Nothing I can do about this with one sub. I can fix that with 2 or more though. But you're looking at kind of like plus or minus 3 decibels all the way down to 10 hertz, all the way through the range of the subwoofer. So, you get up here and you get into the mains, doing all this stuff. But that, for me, seems pretty darn rockin' with a single subwoofer, and then of course that room null that you can do nothing about. So yeah, and this is down to 10 hertz, y'all, right? So that's low. Let me say it one more time. That's low. So I'm rather impressed with the performance that you can get out of this single 18-inch DIY subwoofer being run off a Sinbosen FP10000q with 2 channels bridged. So yeah, that's the kind of performance you can expect out of this. I think in any environment, because this room is nothing special, and if we can make this thing happen here, I'm sure you can make the same happen in your space. And if you have 2 of these, you can make this even smoother. And that, Fanatics, is the journey of building a Harbottle M18X subwoofer. And I mean, what a journey we've been through, all the way from unboxing to finishing to tuning to installing. Really fun and really cool. And I love this stuff, and I love this subwoofer. But it's time for the final word. This is time for you to hear what I think about the subwoofer from what I've seen in my environment. So, to cut to the chase, I really like it. It looks good, and, looks are all this stuff is really subjective. But looks are subjective too, just like sound. And for me, I really enjoyed being able to work with the Baltic birch, being able to put a stain on it, being able to make it match those triangle speakers. And the size of the box also adds to the aesthetic for me. It looks good in the front of the room. It's dark. It doesn't draw a lot of attention to itself. It's not a shiny showpiece that you might find with other subwoofers, but for me, I rather like its classic understated look. So it's got a great look. And when we get to the sound, the subwoofer does exactly what it is supposed to do. One, it sounds right. And if you listen to enough subs, you know what I mean. Some subs sound right, some don't sound right. This one sounds right, and it plays low. And that's what I want in this kind of subwoofer. I want something that can play those super low notes for home theater. You know, if you're looking for just a subwoofer for music, maybe you only need to get down to 30 hertz. But for me, I really want to measure all the way down to 10 and have that line be pretty straight, or even lean up a bit for a house curve. And you know, maybe we'll talk about house curves in another video, and this sub can absolutely do it. And I think it's really demonstrated itself well in the measurements that we were able to get out of it. To sum everything up, I think we can put this in context a bit with other subwoofers that I've had in my theater. So for me, this is in the top 3 subwoofers that I've ever had in my home theater. And as far as sealed DIY goes, this is absolutely my favorite. This thing just rocks. It does everything that I want a subwoofer to do in my home theater. The only problem that I have with this is that I've only got one of them. And you can only do so much with one when you're tuning. If I had 2, and I think 1 is gonna be enough for any theater enthusiast. I mean, any normal person, when you kind of get to the fringes, okay, yeah, maybe you'll want 2, and I recommend 2 because it really does help with tuning. And then for folks that are insane like me, you might want to go to 4. And I don't think anybody's going to need in a home theater more than 4 of these for output, for range, for dynamics, for whatever it might be. This is just absolutely awesome. So if you're looking for a sealed DIY subwoofer, I think you owe it to yourself to check this one out. It checkmarks all the boxes, and I think you'll be just as happy with it in your theater as I am in mine. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, hit that bell so you'll be notified when new content drops. You know, a subscription is a small thing for you, but for me, it's a really big deal, and I appreciate it. And if you've used one of these subs before or another Harbottle product, please drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out. And as always, thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.